You may not be able to read it, but you know exactly what it means.
Many of the cartoons were centered on the threat of Negro rule, even though the fusion government was mostly white. They also played up another fear.
Black men threatening white women became a theme. White men need to do all that they can to protect white womanhood.
This was all part of North Carolina Democratic strategy, but it echoed the national racist rhetoric of the time. In one speech that Democrats printed in a Wilmington paper, a prominent Georgia writer named Rebecca Felton said,
"If it takes lynching a black man a day to protect white womanhood, I say lynch."
Her speech prompted a Wilmington black man named Alex Manley, owner of the black-run Daily Record newspaper, to respond with a column. He made a simple observation that, at the time, was shocking.
That white women who had liaisons with black men did so voluntarily and enthusiastically.
Manley wrote, "Every Negro lynched is called a big, burly black brute, when in fact, many were sufficiently attractive for white girls to fall in love with them."
Manley pretty much said, in a nutshell, sometimes white women choose to be with black men.
Manley's editorial became another tool for Democrats. Newspapers reprinted it, called it a horrid slander, and ran comments about it on a daily basis. It was just a few months before the election, and white voters were angry.
By the time the election rolls around on November 8th, black voters, Republican voters, had been thoroughly intimidated here.
By all accounts, the elections of 1898 were a sham. The Democratic Party had a paramilitary group called the Red Shirts. They attacked and blocked black residents from voting. At a rally just before the election, Alfred Moore Waddell provoked the crowds. He said, "Negro office holding ought at once and forever be brought to an end, even if we have to choke the current of the Cape Fear River with carcasses." The votes were counted, and the Democrats won.
Democratic candidates won every seat they had a candidate up for election in.
But some local fusionist politicians remained in power because their seats hadn't been up for re-election, like the white Republican mayor and the Board of Aldermen. And of course, the election did nothing to undo the economic power black folks held in the city. The Democrats had won the election, but their goal of total white supremacist control remained out of reach.
And so they engineered what was essentially a coup d'etat.
The day after the election, at a gathering for white men in Wilmington, the Democrats unveiled a document called the White Declaration of Independence. It contained an ultimatum. Cynthia Brown, whose descendants were in Wilmington back in 1898, is a historian at her church where there's a preserved copy of the Declaration from the next day's newspaper.
"We will no longer be ruled and will never again be ruled by men of African origin."
They would strip black men of voting rights. They would give white men a large part of the employment heretofore given to black men. And as for Alex Manley, "We demand that he leave this city forever within 24 hours." The next morning, hundreds of white men marched to the offices of the Daily Record. Manley was gone. He had fled to save his own life. They set the Daily Record building on fire. This is where it once stood.
Once the white leadership destroyed Alex Manley's printing press, they destroyed one way in which the African American community in Wilmington could organize itself and keep itself informed.
At City Hall, the mayor and Board of Aldermen were forced out.
There's 200 armed men in City Hall at the time. They didn't do it of their own free will. And as they resigned, a new member selected by the Democratic Party was voted into office.
Waddell, who once threatened to fill the Cape Fear River with black bodies, was the new mayor of Wilmington. Meanwhile, the mob had grown to about 2,000 men, and the violence spilled into the streets. In these photos, X's mark where the first black residents were killed.
The stories are that they were dumped into the river, and there are varying stories about how many people were killed.
I see 40 to 60 clearly as fatalities as a result of the violence, but I think it was higher.
Many black residents hid for days in the swamps and the wooded cemeteries in the city, including Cynthia's great-grandmother. thousands of other residents fled Wilmington, never to return. Shortly afterward, Democrats printed booklets celebrating a glorious victory, and in the newspapers depicted Black residents as the instigators.
This image is a gross misrepresentation of what actually happened during 1898. You know, what you see is African American men with guns, not white men with machine guns.
The city never regained its Black majority population. Jim Crow laws, like literacy tests and poll taxes that prevented Black people from voting, were immediately enacted, and Wilmington's spirit of Black opportunity was crushed. Black political representation in the state was over. It would be 90 years until North Carolina elected its next Black Congress member.
Wilmington did a really great job of covering up a very dark past for a very long time.
Over the years, the textbooks on North Carolina's history have struggled to accurately describe what happened in 1898. This one from 1933 says the situation was unfortunate for both races. And this one from 1978 doesn't have that much more detail. But they both praise Charles Aycock, a politician who helped perpetrate the riot. They say he had a keen mind and a kind heart, and that, in fact, he was one of the best friends that the colored people had in the state. It's a legacy that North Carolina has yet to fully undo. The names of the perpetrators are on Wilmington school buildings and city parks. But the legacy is also bigger than those names. Turn on the news, and the state's long history of political suppression echoes.
We turn to a strict new voter ID law in North Carolina, racial gerrymandering, and a push for new voting maps.
The court says the Republican-led legislature redrew congressional districts along racial lines, violating the Constitution.
There's a tremendous amount of intimidation that is still felt by the Black community.
It doesn't have to be mass mayhem and violence in the streets.
The strategy shifts towards designing state laws in such a way that you could exclude Blacks from voter participation.
The subliminal pursuit of continuing the white Declaration of Independence.
And if you don't see it for what it really is, it can happen all over again.
If you don't see it for what it really is, it can happen all over again. November 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina. A mob of 2,000 white men expelled Black and white political leaders, destroyed the property of the city's Black residents, killed scores, if not hundreds of people, Black people. And then they buried the history, the story of the violence, and the perpetrators were cast as heroes. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar to you? We celebrate our oppressors. We celebrate those who seek to annihilate us. I'm talking about people like Columbus, celebrated all over the world. A statue of Columbus is up there in St. Anne, near to the St. Anne's Bay Hospital, right beside the Marcus Garvey High School. You know, we've got the Victoria this and the Victoria that and the bust of Victoria here and there. We've got roads named after enslavers and places named after enslavers. That has something to do on this day as we observe World Day for African and African Descendant Culture. It speaks directly to the extent to which there has been a massive annihilation of African culture, of the African mind, of Africanness, and anything African. The Jamaica Peace Council has written an open letter to the Biden-Harris administration I was reading through this, and I kept looking over my shoulder. I said, this sounds like somebody was, it sounds like me. It sounds like me. I'm serious. That's what I thought. I thought, wow. Yes, true, right, exactly. This is what I was saying as I was reading through that open letter written by the Jamaica Peace Council to the Biden-Harris administration. The Jamaica Peace Council welcomes a major shift in tone, direction, and posture represented by the new U.S. administration. The inauguration of the Biden-Harris administration came at a time when Americans were engulfed with a feeling of hopelessness as the pandemic ravaged the country while leadership seemed to be missing. Symbolizing repentance, the Biden-Harris administration, ahead of their inauguration, held a memorial for the 408,000 citizens who had died from the coronavirus, showing the empathy and respect for human dignity, which was previously lacking. This is not the part of it that I say so like me. I'll tell you where I was talking. Anyway, so they continue. This was a fitting backdrop to their immediate initiatives to stem the spread of COVID-19, step up the vaccine campaign, and make negative COVID results mandatory for travel. Among the other laudable initiatives from a $2 trillion allocation are assistance to qualifying individuals and families and failing small businesses in order to avert the growing economic depression. The Jamaica Peace Council says that it applauds the shift towards placing a high value on global health and the issue of climate change by rejoining the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Accord, while also ending the Keystone XL pipeline project at home. The new administration signaled immediate action to address burning immigrants' issues by overhauling immigration laws to give migrants a sense of hope, etc. Now, they go on to say that they were heartened by the fact that the Biden administration chose racial justice as one of their priorities on which to take immediate action. This is a victory for the peaceful Black Lives Matter movement, which was vilified and distorted by those who wish to suppress truth, the Jamaica Peace Council argues. And then it says, this new administration seems poised to change the image and role of on any administration. It is controlled at a broader level and not necessarily Democrat or Republican. And as you heard just now, first it was the Democrats who were in the position that the Republicans are now. And they just continue to switch places like that over time. You'll see that back and forth thing. Black people are going to have to take, African people are going to have to take, put themselves in charge of themselves and take charge. Step up to the plate. Reparations is going to be the key to that. But in the meantime, while we fight for reparations, we can't get up voting for a white man and expect that he's going to change our situation. It really isn't going to happen. And sometimes it really has nothing to do with the color of the skin, because we saw AFRICOM, for example, that the Jamaica Peace Council referenced there, was strengthened and expanded across the continent of Africa. Africa was even more militarized under Barack Obama than any other time. AFRICOM strengthened and expanded under Obama. Hillary Clinton said at the moment that they identified the Sahel as a so-called dangerous place, this is where the terrorists are training. At the moment that they started to foment wars and sending their mercenaries into Mali and the Cameroon and so on, at that moment she said that AFRICOM would have to be expanded. She said it, and Obama did it. And I don't expect that there will be any less militarization of Africa under the Biden-Harris administration than any other time. I think there might quite likely to be more. And the reason for that is that Donald Trump was America first. Nationalistic in outlook. Almost didn't care what was happening in other places, even while they kept AFRICOM in place, strictly in place. And his daughter Ivanka was running up and down in Cote d'Ivoire. Remember that? You know, we've got to watch to see what deals she made there, because I'm sure it had to do with chocolate, with cocoa. But now, the Biden-Harris administration are going back to making America respected in the world. What does that mean in real terms for Africa and the African diaspora? That is a question that we must answer, because in that question lies a truth. So I'm not hopeful. I've never been hopeful of any of these oppressive regimes changing administration and that change being a positive change for me as an African, or for Africa, continental Africa, or the African diaspora. No, because it doesn't matter. Our experience and history has taught us that regardless of what happens, the African remains underfoot. They've got their knees on our necks still, and still we can't breathe. But we're all jumping up and down, dancing, prancing, and waving flags that there's a new administration because Trump is out. That's a bag of something that you can just throw down the bush. You can parachute that. Anyway, we won't spend much more time on that. Time will tell. You're inside of the Africa Forum. It is Running African. Thank you so much for joining us on the forum. We're standing by to go to Ghana.